All right, I want to introduce the speaker for today. So I have the pleasure of introducing Dowell Myers. He's professor at the USC Price School of Public Policy and also director of the Population Dynamics Research Group there. He's widely recognized specialist in urban growth and societal change with expertise as a planner and urban demographer. He's been advisor to the Census Bureau, and he has a classic book on that called Analysis with Local Census Data, Portraits of Change. He also made important contributions to the demography of immigration, which is the area I know more about, so I know his work. And he has a book in that area called Immigrants and Boomers, Forging a New Social Contract for the Future of America. It's widely recognized. He also has numerous other influential articles on the topic. So his past work spans both urban demography and immigration. So I think he's of interest to a lot of us in the CCPR. His recent research focuses on public narratives about immigration, aging, and taxation, projections of generational change in the US, California, and Los Angeles in particular. And I think that's related to a topic for today entitled Talking Demographics, Immigration Projections, Audience, and Narratives. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Andres, for that introduction. Yeah, there's some controversial stuff in here. I did not put it in the title, so I didn't know who else it might attract. So it's quite a discouraging moment in our world right now, how things are unraveling from truth to myth. And it all kind of revolves around narratives. And I think demographers don't do enough with narrative. They let other people do it for them, and they get it really badly wrong. So that's the long and the short of it. I should acknowledge my collaborators who I've been drawing upon for the work I'm summarizing here. Lisa Chen is here today. She helped me actually get the PowerPoint together, had some good input on that. And I want to also issue a land acknowledgement. This is from USC and also from my town of Pasadena. So I apologize for my voice. I had a cold about 3 weeks ago and took my voice away for a week. And now I've been teaching again, so I'm getting back to it. It warms up as I talk. I found out. Okay, so overview. Just a little bit about my career and vantage point. I'm really at the interface between demography and public issues. And as an urban planner, we encounter a lot of pushback on topics. Also, as an urban planner, I look at the future. Demographers also look at the future, so I kind of got it on steroids. And there's lots of debates over what the future is. And if you don't like the future, the trouble is you can change it. And so Census Bureau puts projections out there. They don't realize there's an audience listening what they're saying and contemplating changes. So that'll come up here as one of my topics. So I think I have a unique vantage point. I just want to share it with you all here. And looking at some real data and looking at how it gets interpreted. So I think demographers need to attend to the narratives because their subject matter is so potent. Talking about immigration, race. I mean, these are political issues that get really bastardized in popular terms, but they're real and we can do better. I have like 3 different cases I'll talk about to illustrate the points here. They're very concrete. The one is not controversial at all. Why might it appear that immigrants are taking all the jobs and replacing white Americans? Because there's a conspiracy theory out there that hinges on that. And we'll show the real truth, but we'll also show what glimmer of fact they might build on to build their narrative about replacement. To us in demography, it's just basic. What do you mean by replacement? It's succession of generations. It's like life and death. It's how it works. Well, it's been politicized. I'll then talk about the trial of the Census Bureau population projections and how they're interpreted in the media. The Bureau has been changing its approach, fortunately, but it went through one period of dramatization, which got into trouble, and then they've been winding it down. And then when I was already invited by Andres. Thank you, Andres, for the invitation. If you want to blame him, he brought me here. the Census Bureau came out with new projections in November after the invitation was already issued. And I thought, oh, gosh. Oh, I'm gonna have to go back to projections. I can't let it lay there on the table. Oh, there's Bill Fry. He's got his take out there. Well, it's not bad, but it's off a little. So I'm gonna bring that in and as part of the story of how the Census Bureau projections, it's like a loose cannon. It's firing dramatically and they don't really quite know who's it supposed to impress. As an urban planner, I have ideas. I've written about it, published about it, and I'll point you to those. I bet the last slide has some references to citations I've cited in my work and other people's work. Then I'll come back to the old age dependency idea that I've been working with since 2011. It's really antiquated the way it's phrased right now. The Bureau projections show it again. They have the wrong ages for old age and workers. Well, everybody uses age 65 plus for old age because that's when Medicare starts and close to Social Security. So it's roughly right, but the children or the working age is unclear. So the really question is, well, who's the audience that we're trying to impress and how should we formulate that? Now, I'll show you some, it's brand new using their new projections. I'll show you. And you can decide which version you like the best. That makes the most sense to you. So my motivating questions here is, first off, why do we only calculate demographic changes and not explain the meaning of those changes to public audiences? I look through the literature, I just don't find any guidance on that. It's just, we worry about how to calculate it. And then after it's done, well, we leave that to the journalists or somebody. And that's not working out well lately. In fact, populations are deeply interwoven of different subgroups that have a lot of complementarities and have a lot of benefits that are shared. But we don't hear that. We hear about divisions, how the population is divided up into segments of the pie, and which segment's getting bigger and who's getting more, and it's very divisive. When in fact we're totally dependent on each other. The story of interdependency is not in the public airwaves. I mean, you do not hear it today except for one topic, which is climate change. That's the only one that's carrying that mantle. But the population really, I think, personifies that. So finally, then, why should you feel any responsibility for all this? You don't really have to feel responsibility. I'm not trying to make you solve the problems of the world. No one else can solve it either. But that's probably how I ended up getting back into looking more at the political themes, because I realized the politicians, they weren't getting it done, and the political scientists are halfway there. Some of my work collaborates with political scientists at USC, Morris Levy. I'll highlight that. We do some experiments to show what difference it makes how you talk about these issues. So those are my motivating questions. And not going to solve all the world's problems, but we need to start by figuring out how to depolarize the world, how to build more connection, less division. So the demographic factors, as you all already know, are totally important because they undergird most of all social, economic, and political life. They're everywhere, and the topics are so potent. So the big challenge for us is in this room, isn't it better that we explain the meaning of these changes to the public rather than leave that task to others? And who are the others? Well, it's journalists. Let me see, I'm going to highlight the ones I want. It's journalists, it's the citizen voters and legislators. It's also foundations and public funders of research. They are important audiences, and you should not take the federal budget for granted anymore. We're not even sure the government can keep operating after the next closing. So lots of things are going to be up in the air, and it's really important to play a little defense and think about audiences that you aren't intending, not the journal reviewers, not your dissertation advisors, not the publishers, but maybe other broader audiences that we need to figure that out. And in case you don't know, there's some presidents of universities who retired quickly, or I guess they stepped down. And a couple of my universities. So I was watching it closely. Things are being, the apple cart is shaky. It's in jeopardy. So the trouble is that demographic changes are complicated. it's kind of hard to explain the details of how they work or the details of our methods, and they interact in a complex way. So it's reasonable for journalists to try to shortcut it, but when they make a shortcut, they need to have a better sense of what the pitfalls are, this shortcut versus that shortcut. And I'll be commenting on that as some alternatives that we could use at different points. I also want to quote here in red, this Nobel Prize winner in economics, Robert Shiller. His last book is called Narrative Economics. He won the Nobel Prize because of his work on stories and narratives are used to explain how the stock market surges or how housing markets boom. That there's a lot of semantics that go on, a lot of like contagion among people. And this is a quote from his book. It's pretty simple, his language in there. He's not really the leading expert on narratives by any means, but he's connected it to real consequences. And this is his quote. He's kind of making fun of his colleagues. Even they will shortcut it. One of the people who I think does the best job of economics, this is a sidebar. I've been reading more of closely Paul Krugman's columns. He's able to actually try to address the public while still giving a pretty nuanced description. It's really a skill that nobody else has, and I can't believe he's stayed on the topic for like more than a decade, 2 decades. It's surprising what he does. But we don't have anybody like that really in demography or sociology or political science, even not quite like that. So the real question is, how could we not expect the public to grossly simplify our work? How could we not expect it? Cutting corners and selectively emphasizing one aspect or another. So here's my conceptual framing, just to finish up this preamble here. The public understanding is really what rules everything. That's what matters most of all, because that's in our democracy, it's people. And if they buy some stupid, silly story, that becomes the truth. And then it becomes real results for the election, and it has real consequences later on. So we really need to be more public facing, I think. I can take them right here. I take them in different sections, but this is near the end right here. Let me just show the rest of this right here. And then question? Okay.
No, I did a question.
All right.
I did.
Anybody but you?
Do you want to engage in whether public understanding is really unidimensional or whether there are multiple public understandings?
They are.
Multiple. So it's.
But it might involve which one did you implicitly have in mind, but didn't tell us about?
Well, I mean, there are different interpretations, say, of the age dependency ratio and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. What the policy implications of that are based on research. So there are different public understandings that result in a debate about policy.
Okay, we can take that on in that third section, that third case.
But I'm trying to understand your framework.
Well,
Is your framework that there are multiple public understandings or?
yes, I guess there is. There's mine. But you know, I should also share with you my unique vantage point. My undergraduate degree is actually in anthropology. And the number one rule in anthropology is to avoid cultural centrism.
Yeah.
To be open and listen to all cultures and try to accept them on their own terms. So I just take that for granted. I should have said it maybe. But there are multiple, and I've done a lot with immigrant assimilation, which is, there's differences within academia that are pretty huge. But I'm prepared to handle all those later also, if it came up. Yes.
Thank you. I guess my question is, how do you adjudicate between our responsibility to not speculate too much about our findings? And then also our responsibility to couch them in something that's a reasonable explanation, because I feel like I'm more scared of calling something, I'm more hesitant to talk about causal explanations if I'm not actually making that claim.
Yeah.
And I don't know how, or maybe, yeah, so I.
You're good to be cautious, because it's so potent. I'm not claiming that everybody should, every demographer needs to do this, but some portion of the demography profession does. And it depends on your personality, your aptitude, the topic you get into. And once journalists start calling you up on the phone or emailing you and asking you for your opinion, you're in it. I mean, I kid you. And what I do is I view my job with journalists is, oh, so what's the idea? Oh, so what do you think that? Oh, okay. And then I coach them. I can spend an hour on the phone coaching them. And that's my job, like, once they call me. And they oftentimes want you just to sort of like certify something they already have as a thesis. They want you to be a quote they're gonna use for proof, and you don't know it, you don't be caught trapped, certifying somebody else's misguided thesis. It's all open in the air. It's not clear what this comes to. All I'm trying to do is open eyes that there is an audience. It's not the one you're thinking of. There's an audience out there, and the audience could be plural. It usually is plural, but the ones that speak up is not so plural. So, yeah, all right, so. And I'm gonna also make a point, we're gonna use visuals. Visuals can have a big impact. They outcompete words and numbers of science by themselves. And it's a trigger warning here. The next one here is, it's been proven, disproven, and it's still really powerful. And you've seen it before, maybe you had ignored it. I tried to ignore it at first. Kept coming up. It's on the wall in the president's office. This is the outcome from the election, 2016 and 2020. It's a red map of all the counties that were predominantly Republican. Now, it might be 51% Republican, so it should be purple map, but it's like, it's 51%, and in politics, that wins. And the country looks red. And the former president swears by this thing. He keeps it on his wall. And when he left the office, he took it with him, framed copy, and he's still, this is the root of the stolen election. This is the proof right here. Now, the other truth is that, well, we don't, land doesn't vote. A lot of that land is empty. You're coloring like Montana, like it's equal to New York City. It's not at all. And so the real truth is more like this, which is size for actual population size and number of votes. And you see that it's much more blue cities and some, red counties in the middle of the country and a lot of empty space. So there's really not that many voters at all. And they're really, but I just, that's the truth. And we all, the bean counters know it and the courts know it. So we don't debate it. It's not debatable, except people still hold on to the other one. And just as proof of that, you can go on Amazon. You can buy this t-shirt. And it's a political message that's being sold based on a misleading graphic, which is potent. And it's just in their gut, they know who won the election. It was red. The map was red. It's incorrect, but powerful. So come up with your own graphic. If you like, if you want to push an agenda, have your own graphic. It speaks the truth. I just haven't seen another graphic that complements that red one. So now, not to be controversial, but why does it seem like immigrants are about to take all the jobs and replace whites? Now, I'm a little bit sensitive about this one because I was gullible to it too. I fell for it also. And I just didn't think about the consequences. And you don't realize it until you try to put words to it. And you say, oh, that sentence, this graph implies, and then you realize, oh, someone could use it that way. Well, somebody did use it that way. There's a whole conspiracy theory. It really comes out of France. It doesn't come from the US directly, but the same things are happening there and here. So let's just go look at it. So here's some, here's a slide from the National Academy of Sciences 2017 study. I was part of that study panel on the economic and fiscal consequences of immigration. We thought this was the greatest graphic. It used data from Pew Hispanic, produced by Jeff Pissell. But this showed over time how much of the growth in workforce was coming from these three generations. The orange is the foreign born, and the blue is the children of immigrant parents, the second generation. And then the gray is the children of native parents. So native born. So those are and you see most of it in the 1970s was coming from native born, the quote, real Americans, unquote. And in the 80s, immigration started to grow, and so a little more foreign born growth, but still, it was mostly all, these contributions, again, this is the net, so some of it's negative. The blue is negative down there at the bottom. That's the children of immigrant parents. Their parents came in like 1910 from Italy. And now their kids are retiring. That's why it's negative. But that's the old wave of immigration, way back. And so here it is in 1990s. And all these things, I think it's important to show the past and the present and the future. So here we go. I'm just going through the past. It's not rhetorical, it's actually kind of important. And you see that in the current decade, it's a huge loss of the native born children of native parents. And all the growth is actually, in this view right here, all the growth is coming from foreign born or the children of foreign born. And if you're anti-immigrant, you tend to paint the children as being their parents' kids, and so they're immigrants too. But really, we know the workforce runs on immigrant workers and their children, and I'll show you some more detail later to emphasize how incredibly valuable they are. I'm just showing you the facts here. So there's that one. Now, another take on it is that's just the net. The net is what's misleading. Why do people use the net? It's simple. It's the easy way to do it. It's a good summary. Yeah, but it really leads to the wrong conclusions. So we need to look at more detail what is going on. So here's this other data set and a study I did for American Progress 2011 or so, really detailed. They didn't want to see all these details. They asked us, so we did it. It was a good team. It was John Pickett, Steve Levy, and myself. So why is this Gen 3 being so displaced is the real question. And here's the data on the gross flows. The gross flows being the entrances and the exits from the workforce. Entrances is people who are what? People who are either moving to the country or who are graduating from school and they're going to the workforce. That's the entrance. What's an exit? So I don't see where's the displacement? Well, actually, it's just this little tip right here. That's the net. That's the net right there. That net difference that there is this third generation here is got a lot of people coming and a lot of people going. And the net is not favorable. So where's the immigrant takeover? I'm just maintaining a conversation with a skeptical audience. Well, here's the foreign born. The foreign born in the workforce, you see how it's been pretty steady, actually, the number of arrivals over the decades. It's really relatively steady. Been growing a little bit recently, but not much. But what's growing is the exits. And those, again, are these older immigrants from earlier who are now leaving the workforce. So there's a slowing net change there, but it's a steady inflow. But we don't care about that. We care about the Gen 3. Those are the ones who are the victims of this displacement. And so the quote victims are portrayed this way. And here is the numbers here of the exits way up high. There's so many being displaced, quote unquote. And then here are the entrances, and it's fewer people entering. And here's this net is going down to zero. So really, what is that? Well, the Gen 3 actually still has over half the jobs. Half of the new jobs that are being filled are still being filled by this group that's negative. or close to net zero. They're net zero again because, well, why? This is complicated. We need a picture. Of course, my picture is going to be too complicated too. I'll just John Pickin. So I'm going to switch to show you. I'm going to do it by race and not just by generation, by immigrant generation. So basically, if you break it down by the 4 separate major race groups, you see that there's a surplus of interests for everybody. This is for like Hispanics or Latinos. Asians, there's more than there are exits. Blacks, there's more arrivals than there are exits. It's only whites that are tangled up, and they are having more exits here than there are arrivals. And so you could say, aha, all these other guys are getting all the jobs. Well, the fact of the matter is you are thinking in your head, I'm sure you're thinking about it. So is there some kind of life cycle in here? Show me some age. How can you do a demographic analysis without age? Well, we could do that. And so in answer to the question, so why again are they being displaced? This is the number of people by age group. And it's broken up here just in different segments. Basically in 2020, these are the new arrivals who just entered the workforce. These people used to be there a decade earlier, and now they've aged out. And so here's the arrivals, the new arrivals that shows up there. Here's the ones that are leaving that used to be there, but now they're just aged out. And the mantra I would come back to, this simple story is, hey, people have a right to retire. What do you mean, displaced? We got a right to retire. You want us to work until we're 100? Got a right to retire. Just and then stay on that one message. It's just the right to retire. It's no net displacement. The majority of the jobs are available still to the group is supposedly net negative, only because there's way too many baby boomers. I can use this language loosely, but I have one myself. I'm entitled to it. Way too many, and they're all starting to retire, and so they're flooding a number of exits. It has nothing to do with access to jobs. In fact, every baby boomer retirement is a good thing, right? It's a good thing for everybody else because it opens up chains of opportunity as the jobs are replaced. So the point being here is that this replacement story, it needs a little bit of work. I've written out a little bit more text on these slides because I know this might be circulated afterwards, so I added more text that I won't repeat right now. But I do think in the bottom line there that we do need to promote the human life cycle to work well for all our benefit. The human life cycle is a good thing. And in all these political debates I hear, there's no discussion of that. There's no recognition. I'll come back to this on my very last slide. I'll come back to this later. People and the public out there thinks that we're all static. Nobody's changing. Nobody's getting older. In my book, Immigrants and Boomers, I had a fancy title I gave this. I call it the Peter Pan fallacy. They think that when immigrants arrive, they never change. They remain like new immigrants their whole life. Well, what do you mean? In 30 years, they're going to be 30 years older, right? In 30 years older, they're going to be 30 years better entrenched. You're going to be further up the ladder, and there's all kinds of things that change. But people unconsciously are just thinking it as static, and that there's more newcomers stacking up. And that's a scary thought. If there really were more newcomers, that would be all this in the same year, that would be more frightening. So we have to help them remember that it's a life course, and it's a life cycle, and it's all normal, and people have a right to retire. You can't stop us. And so turn it into a counterclaim. Now, and you do want us to retire, so it makes more opportunity for younger generations. All right, so that's the opening salvo there about I don't want to use the word stupidity, don't use one say ignorance, but the unconsciousness about what the flows are and how the flows are age-based, and it's totally normal. Nothing to be afraid about. It's something we want to encourage, in fact. So now, in comes the Census Bureau, and they're doing population projections. Whatever I said about these other data, the projection stuff gets way hairier because it takes any kind of change and it magnifies it. out into the future. And the audience hears this future projection and they think, today, it's happening today. And the press presents it that way, like, whites now disappearing. They say something like that, which is in the present tense. And it's actually, in the year 2060, there'll be fewer. Which is not a very, it's not an idea that arouses a lot of attention. The press wants to get attention. They cover train wrecks, big accidents, car chases, and they want to turn the population into this kind of drama. And we have to guard against that because they can have, and there's new people covering the census in the press every decade. They don't, there's a few pros that stay with it, but oftentimes it's a rookie. Oh, the census came out. Hey, you're in charge of the census. This year, you do it. And they don't know, so that's why the coaching comes in. You have to coach them. All right, so this is really complicated. Because there's two different dimensions. I kind of sorted this out recently. There's changing behavior about race, and there's a changing of the measuring sticks about race. And whenever people debate racial change, they start talking about behavior. And it's true. So there is more interracial marriage. It's really dramatic. Yes, it's more common for Asians or Latinos than it is for Blacks, but wow. You look at the data, interracial marriage among newlywed African Americans, like 20%, or it's amazing. It's stunning the changes that are happening. And there's more immigration. Yes, that's true. That there's different ethnicities that come from different countries. And there's differential fertility, which used to be really negative about immigrants. Immigrants brought lots of babies. Babies were expensive. The current data is that immigrant fertility has plunged, and there's very little people talking about it. I don't. It's not a problem. Well, but it takes away a problem that was there because older people felt like newcomers were coming and dumping all the costs of their child rearing on real Americans, and we couldn't handle it. And if that was ever true, it's totally untrue now. And it's worth a grab. It shows how that's changed. Well, I can answer questions about that if you'd like it later. And there's also changing identity claims, which are more subjective, harder to quantify, but they're definitely there. People are choosing what group do they want to identify with, and they're changing their choices. They may even change their choices as they get older, as they grow up. So all these are possible. This is real behavior on the left, and on the right, there's all the measuring sticks, which we don't talk about at all. The Bureau doesn't really want to emphasize too much. It actually has a need to change the measuring sticks because it wants to do a better job. It wants to measure things more completely, or it wants to respond to the changing behavior. And so one of the biggest changes was allowing, first one here is intersecting Hispanic origin and race after 1980. So that now the whites were restricted down to being non-Hispanic white in the press commentary. Then the next line there is allowing people more than one race selection. I was an advisor to the Bureau when that was being considered, and I was all for it. People should have a right to choose. I mean, why do you make them have to choose between one parent or another, or go into a miscellaneous basket called multi-race? I mean, why can't they just say I'm white and I'm Black both? I wanted Obama to say that. He didn't say it. He said he's only Black. He said because that's how people treat him. So he said that's what his reason was. But it's choice. But that choice it creates a real quandary for data programmers, and the press to talk about it. So they keep trying to reduce it to a binary, which is extraordinary because a binary is like the wrong answer, like white, non-white. I mean, that doesn't explain anything, but it's simple. They can get it across. It smells to me of the one drop rule of the 19th century, which really stigmatized people who were, had a Black grandmother or a Black parent. I think we should let people choose. But how to handle that then we haven't had a lot of time to figure it out. And Then they changed the measuring sticks again, this last 2020 census. And the Bureau had enough trouble that they actually wanted to really mix it up, I think. So now whites are restricted down further, because you're allowed to, they encourage people to write in country of ancestry. And if you put in an ancestry country that was different from the race you had declared, it then said you were no longer that race alone, you were something else also, which shrank the white alone category even further, which made people get more worried about the death of whites. I mean, it's absurd the way it plays out. I always think of Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush is former governor of Florida, more sensible than DeSantis. But he's a son of Bush family. Jeb Bush, he married a Mexican woman from Mexico. His kids are all bilingual. That's a good thing. And the Bush family supports it. But according to some criteria, Jeb doesn't have any kids. There's no white kids, so he doesn't have any kids. So what are we talking about? But those are Jeb's kids, and they're both white and Latino. And what's the issue? But in a narrow binary sense, that can be erased. So there's the worst thing about projections, probably the worst thing might be that we're using projected years are represented by racial constructions of the past. We're taking really old ideas from before 1960 and using those to describe 2060. That's not right. That can't be right in America. It's not right in California. We know that already, but that's sort of what happens. So, but why use 1960? Well, because it was neat and clean, white, non-white. Well, that's not reality. You have to pay attention to changing behavior. So this is the big challenge. It's not clear how to do it, but you can imagine it's rife with like abuse as people try to distort things. One of my publications sort of showed that here's two tabulations, and one problem that you get into that people have used to defend the old-fashioned way is that this way is exclusive. You have everybody as alone, and they take the Hispanics out and they add them all up here. So you have a lot of Hispanics, and it adds up to 100%. And that's the goal. The goal is to have the pie add to 100%. But if you want that, you've divided people into unequal shares that are not. The only group that's intact is the Latinos. And these groups up here are double counted, and so you get to 120% in this case. So you can't have a pie. You can't make a racial pie. And to have a racial pie, it defies behavior. When people have two parents, you can't have a racial pie with people in separate categories because it's too likely they're going to have multiple categories. So, but people want to try that. But there's a lot of discussion in this article. Like, oh, where is it? Isn't it a citation? Oh yeah. So this is the 2018 paper. Oh, there it is there. So recently I tried to put together a timeline of just the declining white share. Why am I focusing on white? Because white is the residual that things are being subtracted from. And because white is where the political blowback is coming from that over that group. I'm going to test out other alternatives too in a minute, but that's why we're looking at the white share. And the last census is really disrupted things pretty badly. I like continuity, but you do have to update the measuring sticks sometimes. And you see how going out into the future, the projections are smooth because they haven't happened yet. And so you just apply the even principles going forward, and they're getting near to crossing 50%. Oops. They're getting near to working the wrong monitor, sorry. All right, so let's go ahead here. Now, there is a concept of the tipping point, which is has been popular because it's a metaphor of like it dramatizes the change. Crossing 50% is a tipping point, but it also means that like the whole bucket all of a sudden tips over. If this gets to the edge, it tips, or the whole wagon turns over. Or it could be like a chemical reaction in nature where suddenly something transforms after reaching a critical threshold. The example I'm thinking about recently is like when a lake freezes over. It's amazing. A lake will be not frozen and overnight freezes over because it gets just below and you get a total change. Or it could be invoking this ugly, now outdated blockbusting, where they would try to panic sell. The realtors would panic people into selling cheap. And they would change whole neighborhoods like in Chicago. Or elsewhere in the Midwest in particular. So that's the use of tipping point. But I think that in population change, it's never, that metaphor is not working. It's a smooth, gradual change. It looks much more like this. So here's racial change. This is from 2012 projections going forward. And basically it's just steady. And so the middle line there, the middle is find the middle is the total population, and it's going to go below 50% right here, and then keep going down. And basically, people get older 1 year at a time. And so here are the kids. Demographic change happens with the youngest generation first. And so for the kids, it comes down slowly, steadily. They're below 50% already now. By the way, all this is happening in Washington, D.C. Those of us from California were just rolling our eyes. What are you guys worried about? California went below 50% white in 1999, just before the 2000 census. So I mean, like, okay, we're below 50%. Did anything turn over? Anything happen? We had the biggest boom in house prices since. Is that because whites were below 50% a long time ago? So we know that it's not a scary thing. People in Ohio or other states, they don't know. They just have a sort of mythical view. And they've never seen this chart like this. It says, and this is really a serious point here. Not only is it's a gradual change, but voting is also changing. And there's a big gap between these voters who tend to be older. People age 65 vote twice as frequently as people age 25. It's a real problem. Why is that so? They're retired, they have time on their hands, they vote heavily. They're voting about the future, yet they themselves represent the past. And so the real problem is, if you tell a scary story about tipping point involving all the population, these people up here say, well, no, it hasn't. We still got political control. And I always remind everybody, don't typecast whites. There's Democrats and there's Republicans. They're not all the same. But the Republican Party increasingly is being slanted towards white. But this mismatch in power here is a serious problem.
But don't some of these white voters have spring or mixed identities?
Probably.
So they're not just individuals, they're connected in a network of others who have different identities.
Just not in the survey data.
That's
So,
not my fault.
so you're right, but they are still a small number. So the kids have the highest multiracial identification, although as they get to be young adults, that changes somewhat, and they lose some of that multi. But when the parents are doing it, they assign it to the kids. So they should be you're logically right. We have a lot more experience. It's positive. It doesn't get featured, and what gets sold is sort of the superficial, the aggregate, and then people react to it in a way which leads to bad consequences, which I'll talk about shortly here. I wanted to show you some of the headlines that the Census Bureau went through, because I had a hand, I think, in helping them figure some of it out. But back in 2000, the reports are really dry. They're dry text, all black and white. And they have numbers, not hardly any graphs. It's interesting that it's really pretty boring. And there's a real question, how should you summarize it for the public? And the news writers want to know, what's the news hook? What's the lead? What are we talking about? And we didn't have one. But as time passed, there's issues that were over the horizon now became above the horizon. The projections only go out 50 or 60 years. And so as you go forward in time, you encounter new things. But also at the same time, I'm making this up here, I said, making this up. I'm composing this myself without any authority. But I know that the Bureau was competing for public attention. They decided they had to get the public more engaged and supporting the Bureau because the Bureau's budget was under assault. And they weren't guaranteed they're gonna have funding for an adequate funding for a new census. So they really wanted to get more public awareness. And so they're putting out their different stories. It's huge. And now we get stories every day. And it's really valuable, all these different topics. But in the transition here, they didn't have as much material. And the news writers in the press office, they thought what might be a hot topic. And they threw it out there to the public. And I think the demographers themselves didn't have a lot of say about that. So then in 2004, we had this accelerated racial change showed up. Partly because of changing measuring sticks, partly because of real immigration, real change. And then in 2008, it did it again. And it was declining even faster than expected. And I'll show you the data on that. It's pretty abrupt. And it definitely galvanized attention in the early 2000s.
Those look like those are quotes. Are those quotes from the Census Bureau?
You mean a tipping point?
Yeah, both of those bullet points at the bottom, those look like you're quoting the source, and I'd love to know where you got that from.
Well, there's this one right here. I'd like to have that too. That I can't find the press release,
Okay,
but I recall it, and that's how people received it. It's a little more. I'll show you. There's another factor here that this. I know a lot more after this.
Okay.
But that's so. I think they said tipping point though, because it was a convenient way to mention it. And then this one here, declining even faster than expected. That's what they said.
okay.
That's what they said. I didn't put quotes on it, but they actually said that. Because it was, yeah. So it definitely compounded. And now it's gonna be 2042. So I was working with people in DC and they were reacting to this. They thought, oh, it's a whole new world. Oh, it's a new world. And so they started to really emphasize, double down on this. And I said, well, I don't so sure. In California, it doesn't really make that big a difference. And they didn't care about California. I could not convince them. So 2012, and here we do have this one. This is in quotes. This is from the press release. Here it's a more diverse nation was the headline. Well, no, it was a subheading after the introduction. That's why it's bold. A more diverse nation, and then the non-Hispanic white population is projected to peak in 2024 at 199.6 million. That sort of gives you a little bit of a clue here. A number of people like Richard Alba got really incensed. How can you claim such precision? 199.6? How do you know it wasn't over 200, like 201? I mean, how are you doing this? And why are you so far out there in the future? Well, that's what they said. Then, oops, going back up. My friend Bill Fry has been really involved in the press. He's the number one quoted demographer by far. And he actually issued his own brief. The very next day, here's the census release, and on the 13th, Bill says this is his title. And it's in the title of the web address also. So, he doubled down on that. I have Associated Press story a year later when they put out immigration alternatives. And this is their headline: longer US white majority if immigration slows. So they're connecting the lack of immigrants to whites, you can stay alive longer. Oh, you can keep your majority longer. So, okay, that's in the headline. And there's details supporting that. So this is not good. And before this, we already had an eruption occurred before this. So let me get to the actual data here. I'm trying to see. This is the most recent one. Well, okay, I'm going to show you the most recent one. And they made a big change in 2018. the projections were done in 2017, November, December. And then over the winter, January, February, March, they published them. That's why it's 2018. And so they said turning points. I looked at it, I said, what are they gonna do, turning points? And they said, all boomers will be over age 65 by 2030. And then more elderly than children by 2034. And then immigration will overtake growth for national increase. Nothing about race. They really decided they overdone it before, and they still want drama, turning points, but they backed off. And so now we have the newest story at the bottom right here, and this is like a new headline about population now. The total population is going to begin declining. I'll show you a little bit more about that in a second. So here's the data though, the accelerated decline. I had to try to piece this together because it's not just what the numbers are, it's how is it perceived by an audience. And an audience, you know, in 2000 is different than an audience in 2020. By 2020, you're 20 years further in history. And so whatever that distant number is, it looks 20 years closer. So there's basically the relative perceptions of time. You see they have an abrupt drop. That was mostly measuring sticks, but also behavior. At 4 years and 4 years again, they lowered the age for the year from 2060 down to 2042. There's a little bit more here. So here it is, if you look at the passage of time, how far away are we from, quote, doom? Well, we're getting closer as time passes. But then if you add on top of that, the changes in the measurements, it's getting closer. But then going on my urban planning expertise, I know what the public does. The number one statement the public makes is they say this, and every meeting you go to, you'll hear this. Well, at this rate, by 10 years from now, we'll all be gone. Something like that. It's always at this rate. And so I drew it in. That they are projecting that downward surge, and that's really the backbone, I think, of the political backlash in America, was that acceleration that had happened in the early 2000s, people's overreaction to it, how they extrapolated it. And I would point out to you that there were some coincident period events. And these are totally coincident, absolutely no connection. The Obama family got into the White House. So suddenly there was a black family in the White House. Like, it's already happened. It's already here. And secondly, the Great Recession started. It's made people very dour about everything. The Great Recession lasted a long time. Really, I mean, we're still recovering, but we were recovering until the pandemic disrupted us more. But we still have not, the housing shortages are rooted in the Great Recession, by the way. That's where that's started from. So all this, but it got kind of rolled together into like the racial change as symbolic of all these other things. And we're sort of fending it off ever since. So Morris Lee and I, back in 2014, tried to get funding from the National Science Foundation for a broader project about what people's attitudes were about racial change and economic trends. We got rejected. In fact, they closed the whole division of the NSF that was going to fund us. We couldn't even revise and resubmit. It was like nothing more. So in the summer of 2016, before the election, we put together we fielded an experiment, and we were going to ask people randomly, assign them online to read 3 different stories, well, 4 stories. One was a control story about pandas in China. Then we had a demographic story about growing diversity, and we gave them the true numbers for growing projections for Asians and Latinos, and how it's growing diversity, and quoted a fictitious demographer about it. The second one was about a growing multiracial white majority because of due to intermarriage. We said the word intermarriage. And the third one was the standard census story of a shrinking white minority, and given the year that would happen. And so then we got the results, random assignment. This is published in the 2018 paper. So it looks like pandas, people, they had four choices. They could be optimistic, happy, anxious, or angry. We asked them, how does it make you feel after reading these? Optimistic and happy, apparently, that's for pandas. China pandas, we thought great about that. And it's the same result for all three of these subsamples, which is great to see. And then we tabulated it by, these are all whites, and the response, whites are the problem, so we only looked at whites. And another study, later study, we have it for all races, which is more complex, but it's still supports this story. So you see that basically, Republicans in particular, Republican voters, and we didn't know who they're going to vote for at that time. We didn't ask them. They, 70%, over 70% are really anxious or angry. But the incredible thing to me is that this blending story is the interracial majority, where whites have a broader majority because we count all people who are partly white due to intermarriage. And the Republicans are kind of happy with that, as long as they can still be a majority. It's the word minority, it sets them off. They don't not want to be a minority in their own country. And they really, that's how they react. It's that word. And diversity, the idea of diversity in general, that it's better, a lot better than being a minority. For Democrats, you also see a progression like this too, but not nearly as severe as this for Republicans. So we actually wrote this up and we presented it then at a briefing and staged by a conference at Russell Sage Foundation, staged by Richard Alba and Ken Pruitt. Pruitt was a former director of the Census Bureau, wrote a book, important book called What Race Am I? It's a great book. It's the whole story of how the census has changed how they do race over the decades. And he brought together the top brass of the Census Bureau and the presenters, and they got to see our results 1 month after the 2016 election. And I think it's fair to say they were aghast or passionate at what they were seeing because they didn't realize it. This would be so consequential. So it really does have other negative consequences. When people feel threatened, they won't vote for public goods. They won't support services needed by other people. They're defensive. They pull back. This is other studies have shown this. They're fearful of becoming of the incoming majority, and they're much less generous. So there's all kinds of, it undercuts investments in the future and all these things in it. And especially if it's a false story that they've been told inadvertently, that's really alarming to me, that we've made things worse when we didn't need to do that. So the newest discovery is this one here about the total population. This is just out recently. So I graphed these data for the first time. And so I just asked the question, so when do we get to be 400 million? Same problem in California. When do we get to be 40 million? We were almost at 40 million, we're falling short of it now. Well, it's 400 for the US. And you see that it's each projection series earlier was already coming in lower. The most recent one, way lower. And so they say now we're gonna be losing population. Here's a graph of the immigration alternatives. You have high immigration, which is the green line, you'll have more population growth. The zero immigration, which is not going to happen, just for reference, we're losing population already because we don't have enough births, more deaths, less births, less immigration, and under this alternative it'd be zero. So it's a very different picture than what it was just recently. I want to just conclude here looking at the senior ratio and old age dependency and how that could be part of the story for turning things around, I think. I have different ways to measure it. That this is a measure showing you a fault of projections. All projections start from present and go into the future. They don't talk about the past. They don't want to waste pages of space on the past. They just do going forward. So you can't see where is it coming from. What was it before? I'm going to correct that for you, because I think we can get the old age dependency to work a lot better the concept is archaic. It assumes that working age to support older people starts at age 18 or 16, like farm labor or something. I know, that's not really true, because people can stay on their parents' health insurance till they're 25 or so. And I'll show you some fiscal data next after this. It's 25 is really when you can start to be a working person who can support other people on your shoulders. So dependency is a bad word. But old people want to be independent. My mother was never dependent. Well, she died in her 80s. She had her own condo, drove her own car. She had more money than anybody else. She was not dependent. And most older people want to feel that. So who's the audience we're talking to with this? Who's the audience for this? This is basically just an archaic idea used in the past to compare third world countries, and the United Nations uses it. Census Bureau is using it in their current projections to display data, and using it with age 18. I suggest a more neutral term instead of dependency. This is called senior ratio. All right, and so I think the bottom line there is it's important to compare the trends to the past, because people don't know how to evaluate. You give them some number in the future, what do they compare it to? You can compare it to 0. You can compare it to 50%. Those are all natural points. But if it's some quantitative number, what do you compare it to? Well, you have to compare it to the recent past and see what we saw before. But before I go there, this is from the National Academy of Science report. And I wasn't exaggerating. Age 25 is when people become net fiscal supporters. It's only after that age. And here you see it's true of immigrants and children. And no, this is second generation here. This is third generation. Crucial thing about all this is how much do we invest in our kids, into our youth, into our young adults. It's age 25 for all of them, but the more education they have, the more net tax payments they make relative to their services they consume. So people in middle age are big cash cows for taxes. And I think that's their role in life. They're at a stage when you should be able to do that. Here's a second generation and children of immigrants. You really get this big fiscal benefit. It's a big return by investing. But if you think immigrants are a waste and you undercut all their funding, you're torpedoing your future. Because we could get a big benefit here if we. This was not publicized out of the National Academy. So on to the senior ratio, two different choices here. Should you show only future years? Or should you show from 1980 to 2040? Which one looks better to you? Depends on who you are. Think about, imagine who the audience might be. So this one here has a lot more variation. So that's kind of cool. As a statistician, you all are drawn to variation. I like bigger variation. That's pretty good, but it starts only in 2025. I don't really know which one. This one starts back in 1980. What do you see here? Less variation because it hasn't gotten very far yet by 2040. But what do you see here? What I see here is why we've ignored the children and the old age dependency ratio or my senior ratio. We've ignored it because it didn't matter. It was constant for like 30, 40 years. Anything that's constant, it's like a blue sky. So what? Flat. And then it takes off in 2010. Or just after 2010. Anybody know why it takes off? It's good to have a popular explanation for it. People know. It takes off because the first boomer was born in 1946. 65 years later, it's 2011. It's the baby boomer generation. They're hitting 65 and they're flooding the zone. And that's why it's skyrockets. And the important thing is, I think the voters and decision makers, they make decisions based on what they've learned in the past. They basically are all kind of assuming something like this. It's just not discussed in the federal government this way at all. Social Security doesn't treat it this way. They don't see it they're not aware of that constancy that was there. And in fact, it's taken off now. It says, time for a change. Wake up call, time for a change. And I think this does that. Whereas this way here, you just see what difference is there. And you don't, so 60, what does that mean? Is 60 a lot or a little? Well, I can tell you right here, the 40 is about double what it was before. And also just to treat you with California. We could do the same thing with all these other states, every county in California. And I find this is actually heartening to me because this surge in the senior ratio is everywhere. The state that has the lowest increase is Oregon. And it's not much worse than California. Why is it so common everywhere? Well, baby boomers everywhere. And what's the advantage of having it be everywhere? You could have, I would hope, you could get bipartisan agreement in Congress. It's broad-based. It's not just for the blue states or the red states. It's not just for the cities or the countryside. It's pretty broad. So it has lots of potential to build upon as a narrative about how we're all in it together. So I have these social policy applications. I'm going to wrap up here. Social policy applications. I have one more slide after that. So it looks like young people are going to carry twice the weight. And we should fortify all the young to get ready for this heavier load. Nobody can be left behind. We need to fortify them all. And then I ask the questions. Knowing that you guys are my audience, I ask the question, who should pay for students' college education? And is it for the benefit of the person, the individual? Is it for the family's benefit? Well, now that it benefits the public twice as much as before, why do we burden students more than we did before? Before the Great Recession, college expenses were much less. Reliance on financial aid loans, much less. At Wake Up Call, it's a new game. We actually need everybody to go on board. We need to actually cultivate the future, and it's working with young people. So this is a big implication, and just to leave you with a graphic that I hope is easy to remember. It's just a life cycle. And there's a cycle of roles. It's true in every state. Basically, kids are expensive. You saw in the National Academy charts, kids are all negative. They sucks on the tax dollar. They're expensive. Every family has to face that. But they grow up, they become new workers, new taxpayers, all these positive benefits. Then they get to be middle-aged. And these are the ones who are most cranky about taxes. And you're supposed to pay more in taxes. This is your big chance. And then you support children, you support elderly, everybody. And then you yourself, as a middle-aged person, guess what? I know, I hate to say it, but you go for age 45 and 20 years later, you're 65 and you get Medicare, you get Social Security. I'm getting Social Security right now on top of my regular paycheck. It's incredible. It comes every month. Even when I'm not working, even when I didn't get a grant for the summer, I get a check. It's like, wow. It's great. But I paid into it. I deserve it. And so, but that's the cycle. And try to help people remember it's the simplest way to summarize all these connections. That's how I do it. Anybody else have I have conclusions in a word. Audience, well, who are you talking to? And purpose, who are you trying to impress? And for what purpose? If you're going to impress them, do these data or those words, how do you impress them? And watch out for backlash. You can be impressing other people too that you weren't thinking about. Who might be offering backlash? And then we do have some responsibility, I think. It's not all on us, but we have some. And then the ultimate goal here is for people, the public, to see that the population is a shared enterprise. We're interdependent. And that we have all these beneficial connections. It's not a pie to be divided. Simple as that. Suggestions? Questions? You just want to see the citations? Good.
I guess the first two or so topics, you talked about this sort of like white replacement theory or this immigration. And you sort of talked about this, like, well, if we can maybe change the narrative and say like, oh, in Ohio, it's happened to us in California, and it's okay. I feel like the sort of elephant in the room is that a lot of these conspiracies or these sort of harbored fears are because of racism, and that you telling them that like, don't worry, it's okay in California, we have a big majority, or we have a majority of like Latinos and Asians, that in itself is a fearful or like a scary thing to them. So I'm wondering how much like the margin is necessarily of like changing the narrative when a big portion may just be afraid of being like not the majority because they inherently either explicitly or implicitly think that, you know, being non-white is worse.
Well, people will overlook a lot of stuff. They'll overlook it if their candidate is a crook who's been convicted, but they'll overlook it. They can overlook race also if they wanted to. So I think that you're right, but my fundamental philosophy is if you reduce the analysis to racism, is there a fix for that? How do we fix that? It kind of, it's defeatist. How can we just lower it in their priority of perceptions? So there's always gonna be some racism, but they can overlook it at some point. So one way you could do it is show what the benefits are. No one talks about the benefits. They just say people have a right to come to America, period. Well, but there's benefits. Like have you seen the senior ratio? We really need these workers. Or else the senior ratio is going way up and you have more immigration, won't be so bad. These people can help us. So you have to sort of emphasize the positives. In that case, though, it's like saying, are you worried how many black players you have on your basketball team? We just want to win. Okay. Well, let's turn the conversation to how can we all win together? And then I think you can reduce the attention. There's always going to be people who are diehard racists. Just to build a little bit more confidence. You don't have to really persuade the hardcore. The hardcore are hopeless. And that's maybe 20%. You just have to win the middle. This is what the political scientists say, you have to win the middle 40%. And that's where the contest is. It's not the hardcore. If you have that in your mind, which I did too, it's kind of hopeless. I took on some people yesterday in a waiting room with the eye doctors. I knew it was hopeless, but a Latino guy came and congratulated me afterwards and said, "You gave it a good effort." But I was killing time in there, in the waiting room. So yeah, so there's hope. It's changed the conversation. What's the focus? And we have always positive things. We just don't use them. So that's really I think part of the takeaway. And I think investing in kids is really where it all starts. That's the low hanging fruit. And the fact that we can't, pass a child tax credit or nutrition program in Congress is utterly appalling. But they don't care about kids. They don't care about the future. But no one's really sold them the story about the life cycle. So I say promote the human life cycle. Promote it in a way that makes us all better off. And that would help a lot. So yeah, you may not have anything in your research right now that does this, but you will see a colleague who has it in their research. And you should tug them and say, hey, you need you got a good idea there. You should work it up more. So you can encourage each other. But not me, I'm not gonna do it. You just say, you guys do it. But if you remind each other, we can keep the dialogue going, I hope. All right, so the time is about up, I guess. Thank you all, appreciate it.